I think if there's one thing that unites the TechCrunch audience is that everybody wants to be a top dog. Everyone wants to be a winner. Everyone wants to succeed in being an entrepreneur. But how to succeed? Best-selling writer Po Bronson has just come out with a new book about the science of winning and losing, called, appropriately enough, Top Dog. Po, welcome back to TechCrunch TV.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So, Po, you've got an audience out there of people who may be top dogs or want to be top dogs. You say there's a science of winning and losing. What's that science?
Well, we were interested in, there's that old Eisenhower quote, or a quote that he didn't originally write, but he made famous. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And we wanted to know what comprises that fight, that element. And the last few years, it's been well told with Anders Ericsson's work and Malcolm Gladwell popularizing it, that what we all need is 10 years of experience, 10 years of deliberate practice to get good at something, to become an expert. And I felt there was a problem with that. It wasn't that it was wrong, just it wasn't the whole story, because we are not judged on how we practice. We are judged on how we perform under pressure. And that the ingredients of making somebody successful under pressure are different than just lots of deliberate practice.
So, Po, you've written an anti-Gladwell book about how to succeed?
No, it's very much in the Gladwell style. It's just an addition. It's Gladwell plus this mystery ingredient.
Okay, so Gladwell says you've got to be, if you want to be a great entrepreneur, you want to be Steve Jobs, you've got to practice 1 billion hours a day.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Well, I say that some of this is actually set in birth. It's not just your genes. In your mom's womb, our limbic brain gets organized to a certain way. And the hypothalamus, all roads lead to, all rivers lead to Egypt. It's like the entire hormonal system goes back to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus gets wired in your first month of birth. And here's the thing. You want to know how your hypothalamus is wired?
Well, before we get onto our hypothalamus, are you saying then that the Zuckerberg or the Jobs or the Gates in their mother's wombs were different from you or I, or certainly me at least?
Well, yes. We've looked at these people, and we've looked at their hands. And you can find pictures of Gates' hand and Jobs' hand and Mark's hand.
And what are their hands?
So if you look at the hand, what you're looking at is the length of the index finger relative to the ring finger. And if you have a longer ring finger than an index finger, you're more likely to be a risk taker, to be aggressive, and to have spatial and mathematical ability, and to be an entrepreneur.
So if Mike Harrington's watching this, or Ron Conway, rather than taking pictures as investors, they should simply measure your hand?
They absolutely should see the hand of the person they're doing it. Absolutely. There was a study done in Italy, and it was looking at 3,000 entrepreneurs, and they could identify the size of the company and the growth rate of the company by looking at the length of their hands. More importantly, in Italy, because women there in the north are treated well, but in the south not as well, they could literally see who would be, like for women, which would be entrepreneurs in the north versus the south.
So, Po, you've just, and a lot of people will actually be happy about this, you've just made all investors redundant, because anyone can do this.
Anybody can measure this length of hands.
Is that what Ron Conway does, though?
Well, no,
I mean, is that what successful investors do, measure people's hands?
Economist Aldo Rostacchini, who's done this work, says that all the biological determinants of competitiveness comprise 50% of the equation. Some people say it's 40%, some people say it's 60%. Let's call it a tie and call it 50%. The other 50% is your accumulated lifetime experiences and what you do with your child when they're very young.
So there's still hope for the people watching this who don't have the right shaped hands. They can still become successful entrepreneurs. What do they have to do? What are you telling them? What are you telling people in this book, Top Dog, that hasn't been said before?
People take different strategies to win. There is not one strategy to win. People who are biologically determined might be someone who plays to win, someone who has what's called a gain orientation. They don't worry about mistakes. They play things fast and loose. They take big risks. Other people can be very successful with a prevention orientation, with a thing where they actually avoid mistakes, where they make sure they don't lose. Some people focused on, I must be the best. Other people like, I just don't want to be on the bottom, but they continue to make the cut and the cut and the cut, and they get there in life. So there are different strategies that people can take to be top dog.
But What unites those strategies? What are you saying that is so valuable to make people into successes and avoiding failure?
It's even if you're a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, you're going to have staff, and you're going to want to understand the psychology of your different staff and how they're oriented and what it takes for each of them to maximize their performance. And some people are going to be great on a team. Some people are not good on a team. We have this idea that everybody today has to be good doing teamwork. We assume that extroverts do well in a team environment, when in fact they actually do poorly in a competitive environment. Introverts actually love and thrive on competition. As well, we've had this story in the industry that we're all collaborating, and that a lot of these great things are coming out of the crowd, and they're crowdsourced, when in fact these crowdsources are actually big competitions, and that it takes competitiveness. So what unites all of these different types of people in the end is a certain hunger, a certain ability to be comfortable with the psychological terrain of competing, which is that real competition is not, with kid gloves. Real competition is where you are experiencing anger, you're experiencing jealousy, you're experiencing hatred, you're experiencing self-hatred, and you're experiencing fear, and yet you somehow manage to channel that into your productive
nature. And you
nature.
seem to be in there, and just listening to that, you could have been summarizing Steve Jobs.
And/or presidential campaigns, absolutely. What it takes to compete is not the same psychological traits that it takes to have well-being in life, to be happy.
So psychotics do well in this business?
Well, no, the point is that you express these emotions in the context of the competition. Hopefully, when the whistle blows and it's time to rest, you go back to being a nice guy. And to some extent we make a distinction between adaptive competitiveness and maladaptive competitiveness. And someone who is so competitive they can never turn it off, that would be maladaptively competitive. So we look into the factors that create that, which are both personal and structural.
So people can learn to be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates in the office and go home and be loving parents and husbands or wives in the evening? Yes,
you can.
You can? Seriously?
You can. But the conditions of the competition you're in might affect that. If you have incredible deadlines and you can never turn it off, you can never turn it off.
Finally, Poe, there have been a lot of books about winning and losing. Yours is the latest. It's a must-read, by the way. Why are we so obsessed with winning and losing? Why do we have so many books, so many pundits? Why is there such a massive market for books about winning and losing?
Because we care. Because we care. People are interested because they care. They're not being forced into this. There's somehow this sort of sociological idea that we're being forced to compete. We're being whipped to compete. The truth is, we love it. When we compete, it's one of the only times we actually we're given permission by the situation to actually work our hardest, to apply our utmost energy. And the rest of life, we're supposed to take it easy, look cool, look relaxed. We only get to do that in a competition, which makes it fun. It is emotionally intense and rare in our lives that we get to really compete. And we need to embrace that. And people do care. They care whether they win or lose, and that's why there's interest.
Well, Poe Bronson, as always, a pleasure. I have to just say this. I don't know if this will appear in the real broadcast, but before this interview, you told me you were thinking of retiring. That's not very competitive of you.
Well, this book, a few years back, I had a few surgeries on my femur, on my hip. They had to cut my femur off, put a bunch of metal in there. I didn't have an idea for my next book. I was missing my edge and trying to find it. And at some point, I turned the lens back on myself, as I always try to reinvent myself, and I was interested in that. And by writing about competition itself, I was able to re-energize myself. I've written the book. Ashley and I worked extremely hard. the whistle should always blow. You should be allowed to recuperate and recover and conserve your energy for the things that really matter to you.
Well, Poe Bronson, top dog in his own right, and author of Top Dog, thanks so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV, and I expect to have you back in the next couple of years with your new book.
Thanks, Andrew.